Whether you feel like it or not, we are the wealthiest generation ever to walk the earth. If you're a baby boomer like me, you've lived through an unbelievable improvement in living standards and technology that's changed our lives beyond anything our parents and grandparents could have imagined. But let me ask you this. If we're so wealthy and so smart, why do so many people struggle with money and investing? How come 2/3 of Brits have less than £1,000 in savings? Why do most people reach retirement with only 30,000 in their name? Why is billions of pounds left to rot in high street bank accounts, earning 0.1% a year when there are so many amazing investment opportunities out there? My name's Graham Rowan, and in this 4-part series, I want to show you how to make your money work. So far in this series, we've looked at residential property, commercial property, and stock market investing. But did you know there's a whole new category called alternatives waiting to be discovered? Alternatives are a little bit like new wave comedians or punk rock bands. They challenge established norms and give a kick up the bum to the existing financial services industry. In this program, we're going to look in depth at some of these alternative investments like gold, like specialized loan notes, and also ask some tough questions about one of your biggest investments, your pension scheme. But there are loads of alternative investments out there, like the diamonds you'll find here in Hatton Garden, for example. We could do a whole series just about those. But what I want to try and do is just open your mind to the world of alternative investments and make you aware of the steps you need to take to ensure that you actually qualify to invest in them. With returns of 8 to 12% available, by the end of this program, I want you to see why alternative investments need to be on your agenda. My name's Graham Rowan, and in this series, I'm here to help you make your money work. To help me explore the wonderful world of alternative investments, I'm meeting with 3 people who live and breathe this sector of the financial world. Money Week writer and precious metals expert Dominic Frisby will explain why and how we should all have some gold in our portfolio. John Hill shows how we can achieve great returns while helping create a much-needed new care community in North East England. And Rod Thomas says it's time to take control of our pensions and say no to the rubbish returns that most of us have been putting up with for decades. We start our voyage of discovery with an asset that's literally as old as the hills. Gold has been used as money for 5,000 years, and it's kept its value throughout that time, even as paper currencies have come and gone. Back in Roman times, a centurion's toga would have cost an ounce of gold. And that's exactly what you'd pay today for a Savile Row suit. And gold is incredibly rare. All the gold that exists on the planet Earth could fit into a cube the size of a tennis court. But is it an investment? It's an inert metal that pays no interest or dividends, and you've got to pay to store it and insure it. I'm meeting with writer, author and comedian and precious metals expert Dominic Frisby to find out more about this precious metal. So Dominic, we've come from the streets of Savile Row. Where have you brought me?
We are underneath St James's. We're in the vaults of Sharps Pixley, which is one of London's biggest bullion dealers.
Wow.
And these are all their safes where people store their metal.
So tell me, why is gold such a controversial topic in the investment world?
It divides people. There are some that love it, Jim Rogers, Jim Rickards, that, you know, they've made a lot of money in gold. There are others that hate it, Warren Buffett. Many don't like it. And the reason they don't like it is it doesn't pay a dividend. In fact, gold actually costs you money to own because you've got to store it somewhere safe, somewhere like this. It's also a very political metal. It's kind of an anti-government metal. It's kind of money beyond governments. And there, you know, so it kind of reflects the great argument between authoritarian and libertarian as well, between left and right.
Okay, so from an investor's point of view, given that it doesn't pay us anything, why should we have it in our portfolio?
Well, I'm holding a gold sovereign here, and you can see it's about the size of a 2p piece. And in 1914, up until 1914, this used to be the pound coin. It now takes 270 pound coins to buy one of these pound coins.
Wow.
In other words, the purchasing power of money has fallen by over 99.5% over the last 100 years. And that's what gold is for. It's to store wealth. And it's an asset class in itself. Obviously, having a house is a store of wealth. Having land is a store of wealth. Having stocks and shares and bonds, these are all different ways of storing wealth. But gold is the only one that you can have in your hand, and it is nobody else's liability.
Wow, okay. So what's the best way of me getting to own some gold?
Well, the simplest way is to buy bullion. I particularly like gold sovereigns because as a coin of the realm, there is no capital gains tax payable. You could buy gold bars. You can buy gold in a vault stored in Jersey or somewhere, or Hong Kong or Switzerland. Or you can buy gold ETFs, which are a share certificate on some gold which is stored somewhere. So they track the gold price as well.
Okay, so if my portfolio is worth, say, 100, how much of that should I have in gold?
The old Wall Street saying is put 10% of your wealth in gold and hope it doesn't go up.
Right.
And the reason for that is that if gold is going up, often it means there's problems somewhere else. It means your stocks are falling or your real estate is falling. So it's like an insurance. But it's a very useful metal. In the 1970s, gold was the best performing asset class bar none. In the 80s and 90s, it was a disaster. In the noughties, it was the best performing asset class. So far since 2011, it's been an utter disaster. Until this year, when it's performed very well. Gold is like a hedge against governments. It's a hedge against government currency. It's up 28% this year against the US dollar, but against the pound, with all the problems we've had because of Brexit, gold is up 44%. Is there another asset class that's done that well? I'd like to know what it is.
Interesting. And the other final point I want to just touch on is some people I respect quite a lot think we're heading for a period of significant inflation in the years ahead. Would gold be a useful thing to be holding at a time like that?
Gold is about the best thing you can earn during inflation, because when inflation happens, money loses its purchasing power. And sooner or later, these negative interest rates, the falling pound, quantitative easing, all this is going to come home to roost. And when it does, it might already be coming home to roost now. When it does, gold is the thing to earn.
Dominic Frisby, thank you very much.
Thank you.
With almost every central bank in the world printing money like it's going out of fashion and devaluing their currencies in the process, there's something very comforting about holding some of your wealth in an asset they can't interfere with, like the gold coins we've just seen. Treat it like an insurance policy against a currency collapse. I invest using Gold Britannia coins, which are 99.9% pure and are easy to store. I also keep a banknote on my desk as a constant reminder of what can happen when currencies are debased. It's a 50 trillion Zimbabwe dollar note. So having 10 to 15% of your savings in physical gold could turn out to be a very smart idea. One of the criticisms levelled at gold is that it pays no dividend and therefore you get no income from it. So I'm going to look at another aspect of alternative investing, specialised bonds and loan notes, where you can often get well above average returns for your capital. One such specialised loan note is being used to fund a new care community in Hartlepool in North East England. I'm here to meet the developer of that project, John Hill, to find out more about it. John,
hi,
great to meet you.
Lovely to see you.
So here we are in Covent Garden next to a hospital that's been repurposed into a club, and you've gone in the opposite direction and taken the site of a former school and repurposed that for your new care facility. So tell me a little bit about what's going to be going on in the Seaton Lane community.
Indeed. Well, the Seaton Lane site is a specialist healthcare community that's been designed in and around a community aspect to ensure that purpose-built facilities can cater for a vast requirement of special needs within the local area, but done within a very comfortable, safe environment, blending into the community.
Okay, so what kind of people will actually be living in these homes and being cared for there?
Well, the facility is state-of-the-art and very flexible, so it can adapt to the requirements that come from the local area, but we will be able to accommodate a broad spectrum of physical and mental health disabilities, as well as areas ranging from autism to obesity, should these requirements be apparent.
So John, what made you decide to bring private investors into the funding of this project?
Well, we looked at many different approaches to the financing required for the project, and that went to private equity, mainstream banks. We had a number of different opportunities to follow, but we felt that keeping a controlled instrument with one form of security and one form of repayment was the way forward for us.
Okay, so how are the private investors' funds secured on the project?
The investors' funds are secured first charge. There is a debenture which is run by a regulated trustee, and that covers debentures over all the companies and the assets. So until they're repaid, technically speaking, it's their asset.
So what's your exit strategy for how investors will be repaid at the end of the period?
Our primary exit strategy is to turn the development debt into a fixed rate coupon bond over a longer period of time for a very active pension market that we work alongside.
Oh, I see. So a big institution like a pension fund would effectively come and buy that bond, and you use those funds to pay back the original private investor?
Yes, indeed. It will be made up of a number of different pension funds, whether it's SIPs or large-scale institutions, but they come along and they take that fixed rate coupon on for a longer period of time.
Okay. So if you were a private investor looking at projects like this, what kind of due diligence should you do before deciding whether to invest or not?
Well, due diligence is key for any investment decision that you're making, but certainly within the property arena, you've got to look at the planning, you've got to understand the experience behind it, you've got to look at the underlying product that's coming out the other side. What are the requirements? What are the values to these facilities? As a company ourselves, extensive due diligence was conducted before entering into this facility to know that the demand is there for these facilities, as well as the ability to deliver it in a timely fashion and within conjunction with the requirements of the local area.
Okay. And finally, do you see Seaton Lane being a one-off project, or do you think there are other opportunities for investors to get involved in this kind of more specialised end of healthcare?
Well, our focus now, from coming from a background across a broad spectrum of real estate, we're focusing now in healthcare, just because we understand the streamlining that is required, the opportunities that are apparent within that sector to find stable, secure returns, but also help to put a lot back into the streamlining of care. Areas need improvement, but yes, to answer your question, we've made a couple of acquisitions recently, and we will be looking at bringing other products to the market with good returns, but also that security and also the socially responsible elements that are dear to us at the moment.
Fantastic. John Hill, thank you very much for talking.
Pleasure, Graham. Thanks for your time.
This is one example of many bonds and loan notes that are available to sophisticated and high net worth investors with great returns, especially if you have 6- and 7-figure sums to invest. But you must either do your research to make sure you're happy with the underlying security, or seek advice from a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decisions. After the break, I'm meeting pensions expert Rod Thomas to talk about how you can take control of one of the most important investments in your portfolio and make sure it's working hard enough to give you the retirement you deserve. Before the break, we met Dominic Frisby to learn the importance of gold in our portfolio, both as a store of value and as insurance against the collapse of paper currencies. We also met John Hill, who explained how we can get well above average returns on specialised bonds and loan notes. In a moment, I'll be talking to pensions expert Rod Thomas about one of the most important parts of your portfolio. But first, I'd like to define some terms for you. While anyone can invest in the kind of gold products that Dominic showed us, some of the alternative investments that we want to show to you are only available to certain types of investor. The UK's regulator is the Financial Conduct Authority, and they've come up with the following definitions of people who are able to make any investment they see fit. The first is high net worth investors. Now, to qualify as high net worth, you either need to earn £100,000 a year or to have £250,000 available to invest outside your main home and pension. The second category they have is a sophisticated investor. And there are several ways in which you can qualify under this heading. You can be certified as a sophisticated investor by a suitably authorised body, such as a financial advisor, or you can be a director of a company turning over £1 million or more. The third option is to be a member of an investment club like Elite Investor Club for at least 6 months and make at least 2 investments in unlisted shares. That means the shares of companies that have not yet floated on the stock market, the kind of early stage companies you'll find on crowdfunding platforms like Crowdcube and Seeders. The final thing I want to share with you are the 2 main types of pension that you can have in this country. The first one is a SIP and the second is a SAS. A SIP is the most common form of private pension. It's a self-invested personal pension. These are regulated plans which allow you to invest in stocks and shares, bonds and some commercial property. However, if you own your own company, you can use a SAS, a small self-administered scheme. This is an unregulated plan which gives you a wider set of investment choices, although both SIPs and SASs share the same lifetime limit and maximum annual contributions. I'm not even going to tell you what they are because the Chancellor changes them more often than his underpants, so you'll need to Google the current allowances at the time you're watching this. Whether I'm giving a talk at a big conference or just chatting to friends around the dinner table, there's one word I can guarantee will put everyone to sleep: pensions. But wait, before you nod off, it's too important. For most of us, our pension is our biggest investment and the thing we're relying on to look after us in our old age. But we had a crisis in pensions these last 10 years, so what can we do about it and where's it all going? I've come here to the Department of Work and Pensions to meet expert Rod Thomas, who's going to tell us what we can do. Rod, great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Let's go and have a chat.
Okay.
So Rod, can you give me some idea of the scale of this pensions crisis?
Yes, I can, and it's difficult to share with people the true enormity of the problem. This is something, first of all, that is impacting virtually everybody. Anyone who has a pension, with the exception of people who work for government, are impacted by the terrible returns that have been achieved. The scale of the problem can be shown in numbers. For example, if you have a final salary scheme and you add up all the final salary schemes in the UK together, the total deficit, that's the shortfall that those schemes have, is currently estimated at £1 trillion. That's getting close to the entire UK's GDP. So
wow, I mean, how has that come about?
Well, it's come about because of disastrous investment performance in 2 major categories of investment. One is shares and the second is government gilts. Shares have performed abysmally since the year 2000. They've had periods of ups and periods of downs, but overall have not shown any real growth if you strip out fees and charges and inflation. And government gilts have fallen consistently to yields that are less than 1%. So if you have terrible investment performance, you have terrible growth or lack of growth in your pension fund.
And a lot of advisors say that as you get nearer to retirement, you should put more of your money into bonds and less in the stock market. What do you make of that advice?
Well, historically it's been great advice. The stock market has been very volatile, and the last thing that anybody would want is a massive fall in value in their pension fund in the last few years before retirement. So pension schemes, by and large, switched people from shares into government gilts. The problem is that the government gilt yield has fallen so low with low interest rates, currently below 1%, that there is no way that your pension fund can even keep pace with inflation by the time you've stripped out charges. So what they're guaranteeing you is a falling value in your fund in those last few years before you retire. Not a nice place to be.
Indeed, and of course now what we're seeing is that as bond yields start to rise and there's anticipation of interest rate rises, the actual capital value of the bonds is falling as well, so they're taking a double hit. So what should somebody do in the first instance to find out where they stand with their pension?
Well, most people have never examined their pension closely, ever, and virtually everyone hasn't done it for many years. So the first thing is to get your pension analysed, taken apart and looked at very carefully. You need to know how your pension is performed, what the fees and charges have been, what's likely to happen if you keep doing what you're doing. And if you have all those elements of knowledge, you are well placed to actually move ahead. And as you know, that's a service that my company provides on a complimentary basis.
Okay, so we've been talking about alternative investments in this program. Is there an alternative approach when it comes to pensions?
Yes, there is. There are investments which are clearly not going to be suitable for everybody. It will depend on their financial status and their attitude to risk and so on. But there are investments which will provide a fixed return, typically in the range of 6 to 12% a year over a fixed period of time, backed up by security. It's a very, very interesting model which can provide a seriously beneficial improvement in your pension fund over the years ahead.
So I mean, if somebody went for that kind of approach versus the sort we've been describing, what difference would that make over a lifetime?
Okay, well, let's take two types of people. People who are just about ready to retire. And those people don't have much time to show a difference by having higher growth. But what they can do is switch into assets that will give them higher income. And typically we see people achieving roughly 100% improvement in the income they can have, even if they're at their point of retirement. That's dramatic. It's not as dramatic as if you are very young, let's say in your 30s, and you have a considerable amount of years to go. There, the difference in growth rates shows up in what we call compound interest, and the return could be as high as 10 times more than you expect to achieve with your current fund. That's without any further contributions at all. It's such a big number, frankly, without understanding how you get there, it's difficult to believe, but it's absolutely the truth.
Rod Thomas, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alternative investments are one of the least well-known and least understood ways to make your money work. If you're serious about your financial future and want to maximize the returns from your hard-earned cash, you owe it to yourself to learn more about them and to make sure you qualify to own them. I look at this in the same way as I do the medical world. There's traditional medicine and alternative medicine. If I need open heart surgery, I'm definitely going down the traditional route. But if my lower back starts playing up again, I know that all my GP will tell me is to take some painkillers. But my alternative practitioner, a cranial osteopath, will sort me out in 1 or at most 2 sessions. Whatever the so-called experts may tell you, the fact is there are good and bad traditional investments and good and bad alternatives. What matters is that you have the ability to discern the good from the bad. And if you don't mind me getting on my soapbox here, the shameful thing about 21st century Britain is that we still don't receive even the most basic financial education at school or university. We churn out highly educated young men and women who are clueless about managing a bank account or a credit card, clueless about living within their means, and clueless about saving and investing. As we've seen in this series, even a small amount invested wisely and allowed to compound over the decades can turn us all into millionaires. There's no big secret being kept from us, but there's also no one in authority rushing to make us aware of the opportunity. My mission is to wipe out this financial illiteracy and help as many people as possible achieve financial independence. This series is part of that mission. You see, I think we're heading for some rocky times in the next 3 to 5 years as we live through the biggest financial experiment in human history. But there are steps that people can take to protect themselves from the upcoming crisis. Live within your means, save regularly, and invest in assets that will throw off passive income in the long term. Look at your financial education so that you can become a sophisticated and eventually a high net worth investor. Look at profitable niches in the residential property sector, the long-term passive income in commercial property, the long-term growth and dividends in the stock market, and a carefully selected group of alternative investments. It's only by taking this more holistic view and moving beyond the buy-to-let market that you can see all the options available to you to really make your money work. Thanks for watching.